It was the largest amphibious invasion in the history of warfare. On June 6, 1944, more than 150,000 brave young soldiers from the United States, United Kingdom, and Canada stormed the beaches of Normandy, France, in a bold strategy to push the Nazis out of Western Europe and turn the tide of the war for good. General Charles Wilhelm is our guest on Community Voice. General Wilhelm is the highest-ranking military officer who resides in Carroll County. General Wilhelm served in the United States Marine Corps, achieving the rank of 4-star general until his retirement in 2000. He later served 2 combat tours of duty in Vietnam. He later served as commanding general of the 1st Marine Division and an assistant secretary of defense. General Wilhelm served as Commander Marine Forces Somalia in Operation Restore Hope. Additionally, he served as commander of the U.S. Southern Command for 3 years before his retirement. General Wilhelm's full biography and military career can be found on his Wikipedia page. His appearance today is to mark the anniversary of the D-Day invasion at Normandy. And with that, good morning, General.
Good morning, Steve.
Thank you for coming in. Some say that the invasion of Normandy, D-Day, was really the beginning of the end of World War II in Europe. If you would, because most of us, unfortunately, don't really have a good grasp of history, as we should, and we kind of realize that the older we get. But if you would, from your perspective, reflect upon and recount the events of D-Day.
Fine, Steve. If it's all right with you.
Sure.
I'd like to really kind of roll the calendar back 9 days.
Okay.
Back to Memorial Day on the 29th of May. The last 9 days are a very significant period of time for veterans, for all of those who have a deep interest in the armed forces and military history, and for that matter, they should have a pretty deep meaning for all of us. I'm a little bit concerned about how we as a nation and the members of our society really regard these very special days. Memorial Day comes to mind. What is Memorial Day? I live about a block from an elementary school. If you ask youngsters what is Memorial Day all about, they say, well, it's the end of the school year, and it's the start of our summer vacation.
Spring starts or summer starts.
Yeah. They can be forgiven for that. They're just kids, and, they respond to the thing that's nearest to them right at the moment and the thing that's most agreeable to them. But, listening to people in high places, elected officials, talking about Memorial Day. And I hear statements like, I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day. I hope you and your family enjoy Memorial Day.
Worse than that, have a good holiday.
Yeah, exactly. It's a day off. And I think that's wrong. We have 2 words in the English language, celebrate and commemorate. Now, they both start with C, and they sound pretty much the same, but actually they're really quite different in their meaning. When I hear the word celebrate, I think of high achievement. And as a military person, I think of battles that lead to ultimate victory. When I think about commemorate, to me, that's where we think about bravery and great sacrifice. And why do we have Memorial Day? Well, there are 1,354,684 reasons why we have Memorial Day. Based on the best analysis that historians can do, that's the number of Americans who have given their lives in the wars that this country has fought since the Revolution in 1775. Now, how does that then connect to D-Day that we're going to immerse ourselves in
Before
today?
we jump into D-Day, I think even on a more simplistic level, emphasize the clarification between Veterans Day and Memorial Day.
Well, yes, I guess we need to do that all the time. Memorial Day is for a very special group of veterans who are no longer with us. Those are the ones who gave their lives, not wounded, gave their lives for our country. Veterans Day, on the other hand, was created much later, and it acknowledges all of those who've served in the armed forces in any capacity. So there's a very distinct and important difference. I think both events are significant. Both events merit the attention of our people. But to me, Memorial Day is more profound.
Okay.
As I said, I think there is connecting tissue between Memorial Day and between D-Day. And the connecting tissue is the 2,501 U.S. servicemen who are part of the 1,354,684 of their fellow servicemen who gave their lives in the service of their country. So the two are intertwined, and we need, I think, to look at it that way. It was an expensive experience from the standpoint of human life. On D-Day, 4,414 Americans, Brits, and Canadians gave their lives to smash through the Atlantic Wall and open Europe to the liberating forces that would displace the Nazis who had dominated all of Europe and enslaved it.
Tell us, as a military historian and as a general, the can't think of the right word, the aggressiveness, the demands upon the soldier. I mean, we hear about the cliffs, we hear about the gun encampments, et cetera, of the Germans. I mean, it must have been from what I understand, these soldiers were like average 21 years old. I mean, the incredible courage that you would disembark a landing craft and then been faced with cliffs with machine gun fire. I mean, how do you interpret that for us, if you will?
Steve, I'm not certain that there's a profound difference between Normandy and D-Day and any battle in which a serviceman or woman becomes involved. I was an infantryman. Every fight is a very deeply personal experience. Every battle brings with it its own demands. But I think it's good to talk about battles and decisive battles, and I would like to kind of move us in that direction a little bit. There can be very little doubt that the D-Day invasion of Normandy was the decisive battle in the European theater during World War II. But, in other wars, we've had decisive battles, but decisive battles only occur when you win. It only occurs when you win. And so let's look back at the Revolution. What was the decisive battle in the American Revolution? I would say it was Yorktown. Mm-hmm. And that's when George Washington defeated Cornwallis. Mm-hmm. The British, of course, had a big distraction. The big distraction was a fellow by the name of Napoleon and an ongoing war with France. Then we move forward to the Civil War at Gettysburg. Mm-hmm. And there we had Grant versus Lee. And I think most historians agree that Gettysburg was the turning point in the Civil War. Moving on to World War I, a little bit harder to analyze because we weren't in charge. Marshal Ferdinand Foch of France commanded all of the Allied forces in World War I, but we need to remember that Blackjack Pershing led the American Expeditionary Force, which was very much part of that war. So what we had was Marshal Foch standing opposite Paul von Hindenburg, who commanded all of Germany's forces. And the battle at Amiens is generally regarded by historians as the turning point, the decisive battle of World War I. The battle at Amiens initiated the 100-day offensive that ultimately, through attrition, made the German army no longer capable of waging war. It was almost a case of mutual exhaustion on both sides. Then World War II. Here today, on the 6th of June, we're talking about D-Day and Normandy. Well, there were actually two decisive battles in World War II, each in a different theater. We're going to talk at some length about D-Day and Normandy. In June of 1942, we had the Battle of Midway, which most historians agree, even though it was early in the conflict with Japan, Japan never recovered from its naval losses in the Battle of Midway. And there again, personalities play an important part. On our side, we had Admiral Nimitz. On the other side, we had a well-known Japanese general who led the attack on Pearl Harbor. And his words we all remember. "I fear we have wakened a sleeping giant and filled him with a terrible resolve." So said Admiral Yamamoto, and his prophecy proved true. Japan never recovered from their losses at Midway. Finally, Desert Shield and Desert Storm. There, the decisive battle, I believe, was the liberation of Kuwait. We went in with four objectives. We went in to evict Iraqi forces from Kuwait, to restore Kuwait's sovereignty, to stabilize the Persian Gulf, if that's possible, at least for a brief period of time, and finally to protect U.S. citizens and our interest abroad. And that led to a victory. Now, I haven't discussed Korea.
No.
That ended up with an armistice and a standoff. I haven't discussed Vietnam. That led to a defeat, but not ours. South Vietnam, the Republic of Vietnam, was defeated. The United States was not. We're talking about battles. And to my knowledge, and I've studied this fairly deeply, having been a veteran of that command, I can't really identify a single major battle where our forces were defeated. And as we come forward and we look at the long conflicts in both Iraq and Afghanistan, they ended up really as standoffs. Neither side won, neither side lost, and it was hard to even identify the sides. It's a fairly simple matter to kill a bad man. It's a very difficult proposition to kill a bad idea. And that's what we were up against there. All credit to the young men and the young women who served multiple tours in the Persian Gulf in those two wars. But ultimately, some wars, you have to make the decision up front. The big question is, are they winnable? And if they're not winnable, you need to really, I think, consider carefully whether or not you want to engage. As I've stated before, our young men and women in uniform fight the nation's wars. They don't choose them.
Before we go to break, let me ask you this question, ask you how you would interpret this. When I look at World War II, and I think the population was like a third of America than its current population, within, 5 years we were able to defeat the Imperial Japanese, the Nazis, and then spring forward to modern times, we find ourselves in Iraq and Afghanistan for many, many years. How were we able to do so much in such a short period of time with one-third the population compared to now? Is that a reasonable comparison, or is that totally without foundation?
I think that's a pretty profound observation. We had one-third of the population, but that one-third was 100% committed. Mm-hmm. We don't have that now. Mm-hmm. We don't have that now. Yeah. And when you look at, there were the two sides of World War II. The battles were fought in Europe, but there is reason to assert that a great element in the victory occurred right here in the United States. And I'd like to talk about that after the break.
After the break.
We had generals and admirals who were heroes. We had industrialists who were heroes.
And we had my mother as a schoolgirl who was doing her ration cards and collecting the medals and doing all of those things. And I think I've ran across that recently. It's very inspiring.
Rosie the Riveter and Wanda the Welder.
Our guest this morning is General Charles Wilhelm, 4-star General, U.S. Marine Corps, retired and resident of Carroll County. We're honoring and marking this D-Day, 79th year anniversary of D-Day, and we'll be back with more after this.
Health is a journey. It's making better choices, even when it's not easy. It's taking care of yourself and the people you love. At Tanner Health System, we're there for you with every step, with primary care, heart care, cancer care, women's care, orthopedics, surgical services, and so much more. We're dedicated to helping you live and feel your best. So let's get on that journey to health. You've got places to be for many years to come. Find us at tanner.org.
As a believer in the power of education, we are called to set the standard by shaping and empowering the minds of future generations through quality education. Oak Mountain Academy embraces this philosophy, which is why my children attend this prestigious school. I am elated to serve on the OMA Board of Trustees, where together we prepare students and remind them to trust and believe in the power to transform the world. I'm Dr. Brian Bain, inviting you to celebrate our 60-year legacy of academic excellence. Visit us at oakmountain.us.
Good morning. Welcome back to the Community Voice. I'm Steve Gradick, your host. We're very honored to have in studio General Charles Wilhelm, 4-star General, U.S. Marine Corps. We're marking the anniversary of D-Day today. Let me ask it this way. During D-Day, we heard about Eisenhower. Of course, we heard about, Marshall and many generals. But as being a general, obviously, you've had a relationship with other generals, other leaders in the military over your career, 37 years. And I've got two generals I interviewed before you. I'll have to share that with you later on. It's not that relevant. But anyway, what's it like working with other generals and being in that leadership role and being surrounded by other leaders of that caliber?
Well, we're in an age of technology right now, and technology informs and it enables. It does not inspire. And to me, that's the principal role of a leader. And I made a few notes to myself about inspiring. Leaders inspire by what they say and by what they do. Lengthy speeches just don't carry the water. And I was thinking my way through, what is it that makes a comment by a senior military official or a cause-oriented official, what causes it to endure over the years? And the answer is really, it needs to be brief and it needs to be profound. And I just did a little research. The Gettysburg Address, 272 words. The Lord's Prayer, 66 words. And probably the shortest one of all was Lord Nelson at Trafalgar, as he took on both the French and the Spanish navies in 1805. 8 words. England expects that every man will do his duty. Admiral, why so brief? Answer, he didn't have a radio, he didn't have a cell phone, he couldn't text, and he couldn't send an email. Mm-hmm. He had signal flags. And so that was the message that he sent to the British fleet. General Eisenhower, let's get back to D-Day. General Eisenhower's guidance and inspiration to his troops took him all of 128 words. And I think they're worth repeating right now because at a great many D-Day observances, I haven't heard them.
Before you do, let me make this quick observation. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Everything you mention doesn't equal 1,000 words. I'd rather have those words than any picture.
Right.
Okay, carry on.
Okay.
General.
General Eisenhower.
Okay.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hope and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely. But this is the year 1944. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking. Probably the operation order for Operation Overlord, the D-Day invasion, would probably fill the bed of a truck. But those 128 words were the essence of the commander to the men that he led. And I think that's important. Again, technology enables and informs, but it really doesn't inspire.
Yet it seems like we're lacking in inspiration and leadership these days.
I think we have it in the military.
Okay, very good. Good.
In some other places, I'm inclined to agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think we see it daily.
Last time when you were here on December 7th, and we'll get back to D-Day in a second, you talked about the all-volunteer Army. And it was a little surprising to me in a way, but you're talking about you'd rather have the positivity or the positive nature of an all-volunteer Army, that if it's not right for a young person, then it's not right for a young person. But if it is, then nothing better. Correct?
I agree. And, we look at our nation. The last time I checked, our population was right at 332 million. And if you look at our active, reserve, and National Guard forces, it's in the neighborhood of about 2.2 million, which tells us that we have a need for about 1/2% of the members of our nation, the citizens of our nation, to serve in the armed forces. The armed forces are very selective. It's not encouraging to really kind of examine the challenges that our recruiters face. The sad truth is that only about 30% of what we call the QMA, qualified military applicants, those are young men and women between the ages of 17 and 24, can even qualify to join the armed forces. And why can they not qualify? Physical fitness. They're obese, lack of aptitude. They are not smart enough to serve in the armed forces, which is an indictment of our system of education, I think, fairly bald indictment of our system. And finally, involvement of a discreditable nature with civil authorities, principally drug abuse. Now, many of these young people are redeemable. If you're overweight, you can lose it. And we have some very good programs to help young people increase their academic skills, their knowledge, so that they're able to work with the systems that we have right now. But at the moment, even though it would sound rather modest, 1/2%, the services are having very, very significant challenges in meeting their recruiting quotas.
I would assume, tell me if I'm wrong, that part of your satisfaction through your military career is dealing with young recruits and seeing them emerge as strong leaders and men and develop into full adults. Is that a correct assumption?
Absolutely. And I always like to kind of address this toward a special audience, which are the parents of the young men and women who join the armed forces. I've made the statement, Steve, and I'll stand by it. My largest command was 55,000 troops. And in my view, 95% of the troops that served in that command left the armed forces better people than when they came in. More mature, more reliable, more purposeful. And I used to say, I have two jobs. One is to build war-winning Marines, and the other is to produce good, productive citizens.
I want to mention this observation. The reason I want to mention this in large part is because the observation was made that we went in to liberate Europe. We didn't go in to conquer Europe. And I think there's different tallies and different totals, but from what I understand, there's 13 American cemeteries, 3 monuments in Europe according to the American Battle Monuments Commission. 73,177 American soldiers are buried. 15,856 are listed as missing. And then there's a cemetery in Normandy. I understand you've been there, Normandy American Cemetery Memorial, because there was 1,500 missing, 1,557, I believe, missing in action from D-Day. So there's a memorial wall. You've been there. When you see all those crosses or Stars of David, what kind of emotions or what kind of thoughts or reflections do you have?
Steve, largely it has to do with the scope and scale of that war. I'm not sure, and I hope we'll never see another war like that, and I don't believe it will. You know, if you look at, you use the figure 150,000 Americans, Brits, and Canadians who crossed the bridges at Normandy or who parachuted into the drop zones. The number I use is 175,000. I've seen that very well documented.
Okay.
They were embarked on 5,333 ships and landing craft, supported by 2,395 combat aircraft and 867 gliders. The reason I say I hope, and I'm convinced we'll never see anything like that again, and we'll never see cemeteries that are that crowded. Modern technology is such that would be suicidal. I mentioned that on D-Day, U.S. losses were 2,501. I can tell you, today, if a commander took a U.S. unit into battle and lost 2,501 troops on the 6th of June, he wouldn't be in command on the 7th of June. So technology is a factor. But one of the things that I took away from Normandy, and I know we're short on time, was the attitude of the local people in Normandy, in the towns and in the villages where the battles took place. The affection, the respect that they pay to our war dead is touching. Actually, in some instances, I hate to say this, it's more profound than what I see in our own country.
Our gratitude this morning to General Charles Wilhelm for coming in and helping us reflect on this very significant anniversary of D-Day as the beginning of World War II and the European theater ended. We thank you for listening. We thank you to our sponsors, Semper Fi. Go out and make it a great day. You're in tune to WLBB Carrollton.